Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we're going to be talking about some news I recently saw. BMW and Toyota announced that they're going to be partnering on a new vehicle. Actually, it sounds like a new line of vehicles in 2028. And so that seems really exciting, especially for any of us that are, fans of the Supra, because if they are partnering on a new vehicle, that could mean that it's something that's kind of like the next step there, especially because from the Supra sales and stuff like that, everything's indicated it's basically going to be done by that point. But actually, when I read through all the details, it seemed like they were going in a different direction. And for those of you that just read the headlines, I thought this would be a good video to give you the actual details on what we can expect to see. So let's go ahead and talk about it, and hopefully you guys find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future.
So instead of probably what most of us were hoping for, like a BMW M engine getting put in the Supra, or like the next BMW M3 was also going to have a Supra version, instead this is actually not being led by the M division at all. This is going to be the BMW I division. And for those of you that don't know, the I division is primarily focused on efficiency, so new technology, electric cars, hybridization, and things like that. Now, something that BMW has been very adamant on is that electric vehicles are not the future. There have to be other options. And so that seems like it's a path that they've been going down on their own, and they've agreed to work with Toyota on this new line of vehicles to kind of give them another option. So you can imagine with the 4 Series, for example, they've got like the M440i and 430i, then they've got the actual M4, then they've also got the i4, so if you want an electric car, you can go that route. And so now they're looking at a new option, and that is going to be hydrogen. So they're going to be creating a line of hydrogen vehicles and adding a hydrogen vehicle option to different vehicles in their lineup. Now, of course, the goal here is better emissions because emissions requirements are getting stricter and stricter. And for any company that wants to be able to sell cars in the future, they have to have a pipeline of vehicles that reduce emissions. And the good thing with a hydrogen car is it basically has 0 emissions because of the way that it works. And I think Toyota is probably one of the best people to partner with on this because Toyota has actually been making a hydrogen car for a while. They make the Toyota Mirai. It's not a very popular vehicle or a very common vehicle, primarily because of the hydrogen-powered infrastructure and things like that. In America, for one, it's really only sold in California, so there aren't very many in the US, and you've probably seen one before if you live in California, but didn't even know. It basically looks like a mix between the Camry and the Toyota Crown, but that is a completely different vehicle. It's not an EV or anything like that. It is a hydrogen-powered car. So with this history in mind, BMW has decided to partner with Toyota to develop their hydrogen fuel cell technology and move it into the next generation so that it's a more viable option for different BMW owners or people that would be interested in making the switch. On the other hand, BMW already has a bunch of great platforms that they can put it in, so they're going to use their drivetrains and their basically platforms to push that fuel cell technology out to the masses. Now, the car that they've done most of the testing on lately is the iX5, and this is a concept car that they've been driving around, it sounds like, for a little over a year, taking it to different shows and stuff to kind of demonstrate how the technology would work and use it as an example of what a hydrogen-powered vehicle can do. Now, something that I think is interesting is BMW's approach to this, because even though they're kind of presenting it as an alternative to EVs, they're still trying to treat it like an EV from an engineering standpoint and just using a different way to store the electricity for your EV drivetrain. So a more traditional EV will use a battery that you charge, and it takes an hour or several hours to get it fully charged up so that you can drive away. Now, instead, they're going to be basically using these hydrogen tanks that will store all the hydrogen, and that hydrogen will be pushed into a fuel cell that will use oxygen to create a chemical reaction, and that creates the electricity that's going to go into your electric drivetrain. So it's still going to be driven by an electric motor, but instead of storing, energy and batteries underneath the car, you're basically going to be storing hydrogen in hydrogen tanks, and that is going to be converted to electricity and sent to your electric motors. I also think it's interesting that it's almost like a hybrid because the fuel cell looks very similar to an engine. It has an intake to suck in oxygen, and the oxygen in the air is going to be what kind of creates that chemical reaction with the hydrogen. And then, of course, it still is able to exhaust stuff from that chemical reaction, which in this case is going to be mainly water. So, it sucks in air, it has an exhaust, and it has, kind of some of the characteristics of a hybrid that uses a regular gasoline powered engine. But in this case, it's a hydrogen powered fuel cell. Now, the good news is it's something that recharges or refills a lot quicker. Again, instead of taking an hour or several hours, it's something that you can plug into a hydrogen station and get full in like 3 to 4 minutes. So very similar, if not faster, to a lot of gas powered vehicles. They also have fuel cells that can produce up to 400 horsepower. So definitely a lot of capability there. And they have range up to about 300 miles. So similar to what some of the EVs are doing nowadays is kind of what they're trying to get out of this hydrogen powered platform. It also is less affected by temperature. So for those of you that have had EVs or have researched it, you'll know that in the winter, for example, EV performance can degrade. Your mileage will reduce and a lot of things happen if they get too hot and they begin losing performance. So this will be a lot more stable regardless of ambient temperature. It also seems to do better with towing. So a lot of you guys have seen with EVs how quickly they use up their juice when they try to tow a vehicle and stuff like that. And with a hydrogen powered car, it seems to be much more consistent and much more capable. Maybe not as good as like a gasoline or diesel powered car, but still much better than an EV would do. Now, of course, it's not all great things. There are some negatives to this as well. The biggest one I would say right now is just the infrastructure is not there. Just like it's taken us several years to get to this point where we actually have a network of charging stations for EVs. We really need to get on top of that for hydrogen powered vehicles as well if we expect it to be a widespreadly used technology. Especially in our case in the US, they're only really sold in California because that's the only place you have hydrogen pumps and have places to refill your hydrogen tanks. So if you expect them to be used anywhere else, we need gas stations to be able to add hydrogen pumps, or we need hydrogen gas stations to be created so that people have somewhere to refill their cars. The other thing is if you are able to find a hydrogen pump, it is really expensive. It's definitely not cheaper than gasoline or an EV charger. A lot of the reasons is because of how hydrogen needs to be handled in order to get it to you. The way that they get the hydrogen, store the hydrogen, and transport it to get it to you is all very expensive, and the handling takes a lot of work and very expensive equipment. So of course, that gets handed down to the consumer. So a lot of people with these Toyota Mirais, for example, have shown how expensive it is to fill up their tanks, and it's getting easily over $100. It's like filling up a pickup truck. So something to consider there is that as things get more efficient, this is going to hopefully drop down, but in the immediate future, it's probably something that's still going to be pretty expensive. Also, similar to EVs, it has its own unique kind of safety risk. It is definitely flammable, and if you were to puncture the tanks and create an issue that causes that chemical reaction to get out of control, it can create a fire. So that's something that you would just need to be aware of, and hopefully we have methods to control that if there were an issue where a car got in an accident or something and caught on fire. You want to make sure that your fire stations are capable of controlling or putting that fire out. So something else to consider, just like EVs, it's kind of its own beast. And then the last thing, just on the EV side of things, is they're just way more developed. This is hopefully moving Toyota and BMW into what they consider like the third generation of fuel cell technology, but it has a really long way to go. Whereas EVs, we've been developing them for a long time. So they're much more dense in energy storage. They have much longer range for ones that are really loaded up. Whereas with a hydrogen system, it's kind of going to be limited for the foreseeable future until they really get into the next generation of things. And that's kind of what Toyota and BMW are hoping to do, help this, get much more use out in the field so that more people are interested in it and they can get more support to really build up the infrastructure and make it a more viable option. So like I said, this is expected to launch in 2028. I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of comes out of this. BMW and Toyota even said they're open to selling the technology to other companies. So if anybody else wanted to start working on hydrogen vehicles, once they kind of establish how they're going to work, That would be really cool to see, making sure kind of like with the chargers and stuff, everybody needs a new adapter and whatever. Hopefully everybody can kind of be on the same page here to use similar technology that's really easy to switch between and use daily so that this is actually an option. I know even companies like Porsche are looking at alternative fuels, even synthetic fuels. So the same way we have synthetic oil that's kind of like man-made, the goal is to come up with different fuel options so that we can keep our engines, keep our performance, and not have to rely on a pure EV lifestyle. So let me know your thoughts. Do you think this is something that could really take on? Is it something you would be interested in considering or trying out in the future? I think, like most things, I'll probably wait and let them work out all the bugs, but it's still exciting to see that somebody is trying something new. So hopefully they are successful, and by 2028, we should kind of see how things will start working. But for now, I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.